Intelligence officials tell ABC News that extremists could target election-related infrastructure, election workers, even voting sites themselves. So for more, we want to bring in John Cohen, ABC News contributor and former acting undersecretary for intelligence at the Department of Homeland Security. This is along with Wendy Weiser, vice president for democracy at the Brennan Center for Justice. So, John, starting with you, law enforcement and election officials have been working to ensure that voting is safe and secure for Americans. What do you make of what we've seen so far?
Good evening. Americans should go to the polls, if they haven't already, with the understanding that for most Americans, the election will be safe and secure. Election officials across the country have been working with groups like the Brennan Center and other government and non-government organizations to protect the infrastructure from physical damage and cyber attacks. Law enforcement has worked closely with election officials to make sure that election officials and poll workers and the voting public are safe. And federal officials have been working closely with state and locals toward that same goal. So while there are serious threats out there, I think it's important for the public to know that the voting process is safe.
And while you say the voting process is safe, Wendy, what do you have to say about voters? Should they have any reason to believe that this election is not secure?
State, local, and across the country have been prepared. There have been no incidents, and they are prepared to address them and tamp them down if anything happens. There have been actually historic levels of turnout across the country. As of this morning, 45 million people had already voted, and we've been tracking turnout in real time, and we are on par of perhaps even surpassing the historic turnout levels of the 2018 elections. And voters have been doing so safely and with confidence. And so we should be confident that the election is going to be secure. And for those who still haven't voted and your polls are still open, please do go vote. You should feel confident that you can vote safely.
And so while some polls are actually closing, Wendy, do you have any top concerns right now, again, as they start to close?
Well, I am less concerned with the security of the voting process and the integrity of the process. We do have multiple safeguards in place, layer upon layer of checks and balances to ensure that the vote count and the voting process is fair and that any kind of misconduct or fraud will be rooted out. But I am concerned that after the polls close, that there will be some, and people maybe who are trailing in the polls, and people who've been peddling misinformation about the election, who are going to try to drum up disinformation about the integrity of the vote and try to shake voters' confidence in the election process and try to justify efforts to toss out legitimate votes, or worse, to fully subvert the election outcome. So my concern is more with the post-election misinformation and mobilization to try to unjustifiably cast doubt on the system and sow chaos.
And John, voter intimidation tactics and threats appear to be much more intense this cycle. Why is that?
Well, we have seen conspiracy theories and other content spread by foreign intelligence services, by domestic extremists, by foreign terrorist groups, and even public figures in this country who have said not only that the voting process is corrupt and that the government can't be trusted, but they've also called on people to take action into their own hands, to begin surveilling ballot drop boxes, to go into polling sites and monitor the vote, so to make sure that the election can't be stolen. And what really concerns law enforcement is that in some cases, these calls for action include calls for violence. And we've already seen some examples where not only threats have been directed at election officials or people working within the election infrastructure, but we've also seen confrontations erupt between self-deployed so-called monitors and members of the voting public, where these monitors will walk up and begin questioning questioning the voters. So law enforcement's aware of that. They are prepared. And people should know that if they are entering a polling spot and they begin to be questioned by someone, to notify the officials in the polling spot or a local law enforcement.
And Wendy, the Brennan Center for Justice website states that your organization has, quote, proposed legislation to fund much needed updates to our election infrastructure. Why do you believe the U.S. election system is due for an upgrade like that?
Well, some of the problems that we just heard about, the threats, the unprecedented threats, not only against the voting public, but against election administrators and election workers nationwide, needs to be addressed. We've seen unprecedented numbers of election officials leaving the profession. We are seeing a retention crisis that's going to be really problematic going into the 2024 election. And many of them are concerned about the huge numbers of threats and harassment that they and their families have been receiving since the 2020 election, fueled by disinformation. They need resources to upgrade the security system to ensure their privacy and security, both for themselves and for other election workers and voters heading into 2024. We also need to shore up the guardrails against not only harassment and attacks on our election infrastructure, but against efforts to manipulate the election process, to disenfranchise voters, and even for partisans to interfere in the election process.
All right. Well, John Cohen and Wendy Weiser, our thanks to you and all your input tonight.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.